Okay, hi everyone. I have quite a stack of books to talk about, but I'm gonna try to be brief with all of them because I don't want to be here for 10 years. So yeah, if this is your first time on my channel, I like to do recent reads videos every so often. I don't find I read enough monthly to do monthly wrap-ups. Usually my videos are a bit more of a collection of a couple of months. And I read, I think, 6 books and 1 series, so I've got kind of 7 things to talk about altogether. First, let's be hydrated. So I'll start off with the series. So I read Kingdom of the Wicked and Kingdom of the Cursed. This is by Kerry Maniscalco. I absolutely hate that I don't have a matching set. So I think this one is like slightly larger than typical paperback, and then this is a trade paperback. I don't know why I did that. I really like when my series match, so I might try to get Kingdom of the Cursed in this size, hopefully, and sell this one maybe. First book is Kingdom of the Wicked, second book is Kingdom of the Cursed, and then there's also a third book, Kingdom of the Feared, which released, I think, recently enough, I think only in the past 6 months. And then for both of these, I listened to the audiobook. Yeah, Kerry Maniscalco as well, she did the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, if anyone's familiar with that. So yeah, in these you have 2 sisters, you have Emilia and Victoria, and they are twins, they're witches. It's set in Sicily, like maybe late 1800s. I'm trying to ballpark, I'm not quite sure. So yeah, in this book you have Victoria ends up being murdered, Emilia finds her body, and she ends up enlisting the help of Prince Wrath, who's one of the 7 princes of hell, to help her like track down the murderer, find out the mystery of what happened. It's a slow burn fantasy romance. So if you're expecting it to be kind of romance heavy, it's not really. It's very, very, very slow burn. So what I like about this, I really like the world Maniscalco created. It's very, very like believable. You can picture everything very well. The writing's really good. So these are fun books to read. The main problem I would have with these is that the plot can be really, really convoluted and overly complicated. So much so, when there is a revelation, it doesn't really hit the right way because you're trying to connect all the dots. The dots aren't really connecting for me half the time. A little bit too much plot is going on, a little bit too much is happening, and I don't know if I'm just too dumb to like follow along, but I do think the plot is slightly too convoluted. I just think the plot was just ramped up a little bit too much. I feel like if it was just pared back a little bit and a little bit less mystery, a little bit less confusion. For example, like Emilia would maybe make a revelation and it would be some obscure sentence that was mentioned in chapters and chapters before where you totally forget about them. So there was like a fun twist, I have to say, in Kingdom of the Cursed. I really quite liked the ending. The endings, I have to say, of both of these books were very cliffhangery, quite good. Definitely wants to make you read the next one and find out the mystery, but you're kind of in the dark along with Emilia with what's going on, and I just do find these just a little bit hard to grasp, which takes you out of the story a little bit, which is a pity. So I rated both of these 3 stars. I'm still really enjoying it. I love the atmosphere, I love the world that Maniscalco's created. Everything's really easy to picture. I like the characters. I really like Prince Wrath. I really like Emilia. I love the side characters. It is well done. And also the thing is with the audiobook, I think the narrator is very, very good. I really do like the narrator. It does have sometimes, it has like suspenseful like music playing in the background when something like big is happening. I kind of wish there was a male actor doing Prince Wrath's voice. That is my only thing. I wish there was a male actor doing that. Or male narrator, sorry, because it does take it out a little bit that it is just like a female voice, like just really doing Prince Wrath's voice. Yeah, it takes you out of the situation a little bit. But I'm enjoying listening to these. I'll move on to Kingdom of the Feared pretty soon, I think. Generally, I would recommend these, but only if you like a lot of plot, a lot of like mystery, a lot of like trying to figure things out and putting 2 and 2 together. Is it a little bit too much? I don't know if anybody else feels this way about the series, but yeah, I am looking forward to Kingdom of the Feared. But yeah, that is Kingdom of the Wicked, but definitely well deserving 3 star. I'd say 3.5. I do quite like them. Actually, I'm just looking at my pile. I had a really mixed bag like this. I've got 2 5-star reads here and I've got 2 2-star reads. Yeah, I've got a serious mixed bag here, so that's interesting. The next book I read in full was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is a classic book that I wanted to get to for a really long time, and I'm so glad I did. This was a 5-star read for me. I loved it so much. But I think about classics sometimes, myself included, sometimes you're like, okay, am I going to be able to grasp this? Because sometimes the writing style of classics can be very hard to digest, using kind of like older English and all that sort of stuff. Jane Eyre was so easy to read, and I didn't find that at all. So I would recommend that wouldn't like hold anyone back from reading this, even if like English isn't your first language or something like that. Very easy to kind of understand and digest. So that was a nice surprise, because I thought I was kind of going into like kind of a heavy classic literature book, but it's not the case at all. Very easy to understand. And I really liked the writing style as well. It's kind of narrated by Jane herself. She's about, I think when she's narrating it, she's about 30-40 years old and reflecting back on her life. So it does kind of focus on her childhood and late adolescence, early adulthood. But yeah, I loved Jane Eyre as a character. Loved her so much. She was very vivacious and very determined and strong-willed, which is something I didn't think of before, because I watched the movie like years ago and I didn't remember much from her character, but so she was kind of more of a personality than I thought. This book there's some great feminist quotes in this. Jane talks about like how the world should be her oyster, the same as a man, you know, she should be able to go and dream and do big things. So I'd say at the time when this was released, I'd say this was still, and holds up today, a very feminist novel, which I really enjoyed. When did Jane Eyre come out? I don't know when this came out. Okay, Jane Eyre came out in the 1840s. It came out in 1847. So yeah, this definitely would have been very big for its time. But yeah, it's not really like, yes, it's a romance book, but it is more about Jane's life and the decisions she makes, the power dynamic between her and Mr. Rochester, and how that changes. So yeah, the basic story is Jane Eyre she's an orphan. She's taken in by her aunt and uncle. She is raised in like a wealthy home, but her aunt dislikes her so much, she sends her off to kind of like a boarding school, very poor boarding school, where she's treated quite unwell. Despite all that, she does well herself. She works hard and becomes a teacher, and she ends up wanting to be independent. She ends up becoming a governess for Mr. Rochester's ward. So he looks after this little girl, and Jane is there to be her governess. And it is just about her and Mr. Rochester falling in love, and how the circumstances for them don't really work out. He's a lot older than her. He's like a different class of wealth above her. Then lots of crazy things happen, and I won't spoil it. I know this came out 200 years ago, but you know, I still won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it. What I really loved about this, it had a really, yes, some outdated things, definitely. Like, I think the romance in this wouldn't fly today as well, but I definitely felt like reading about them, like I couldn't get over how much I believed how in love they were. Like, I think it was just so well done. You really believed that Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester are really in love. So much stuff happens. Really quite tragic in a way. Like, it is quite a tragic, kind of heart-wrenching story. Definitely has some bittersweet moments. I loved it. It was just such a unique, well done, well written, great characters story. Like, I just loved it, and I was quite surprised by how much I loved it. I knew it would be good. Like, it's a classic for a reason. It's a classic book. But yeah, I loved it. Also, I loved this edition I got. My brothers got me this for Christmas, or my birthday one year, I think. I don't know where they got it, but it's really nice. But yeah, so highly recommend this, especially if you want to maybe dip your toes into classics. This is a good place to start. And on to the bad. I read Midnight in Everwood by M.A. Kuzniar, and I hated it. Oh my gosh, I did not like this book at all. It's funny, I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads, and that was generous. It was definitely like 1.5, maybe, for me. I didn't want to give it 1 star because I feel like other people would enjoy it. It just wasn't for me. Then also the fact that I don't know the Nutcracker story. I never watched an adaptation. I never read the book. I don't know the ballet. So this book is like a retelling of the Nutcracker. So maybe if I was aware of the story and saw it as a bit of an adaptation, I might have enjoyed it a little bit more. But unfortunately not. I did not like this. It's funny, I said this in my December vlog. My December vlog, I read this, and I think I wrapped this up at the end of that vlog, so I'll link it here. So like my thoughts on it were a bit more fresh than they are now. It's funny, I said it there, like I do notice a lot of like booktubers do their like best books of the year or worst books of the year at like the beginning of December, and I'm just like, but you could potentially read your best or worst book in December, like at the very end of the year, and that's what happened to me. I just didn't really like this. It was very forgettable. So the plot is, I even forget her name. So you have Marietta, so she's from an upper class English family. She's a ballet dancer, but her parents have kind of put an ultimatum on it, so she kind of has to, she can dance until she's about 21 years old. Then she has to like get married, you know, conform to society. She doesn't want to do that. She really wants to go and be a dancer, go join a dance troupe and go to dance school. A man moves in like next door to them. He's, I think the way to pronounce it is Drosselmeyer. German name, so sorry if I'm butchering it. And he makes these like magical toys. He ends up volunteering to build Marietta's set for her dance on Christmas Eve. And he ends up like, he kind of tries to persuade her to marry him. She believes he's quite sinister as well. And while she's trying to run away from him, she ends up being transported to a different realm, a magical realm. She's kind of taken into the palace. The king there basically kind of captures her and forces her to be kind of like a dancing kind of slave, if you will. Like at parties she's forced to do ballet. There's a bit of a like romance between her and the captain. So Captain Legat, he's one of the soldiers. There's a revolution happening. It does sound interesting when I talk about it, but so that's why it does have its 1 or 2 stars. The story itself was decent. I feel like the plot itself is decent. I really liked the ending actually. I really liked how it kind of wrapped up in a way, but it just wasn't very well executed. I didn't believe any of the characters. I didn't believe any of them were very like well-rounded. I felt like all the characters were very one-dimensional. Marietta just kind of like got herself into trouble all the time for no reason, really. She was okay as a character, not awful, but not great either. I didn't believe the stakes of her life that much. But yeah, for me, it probably was the writing and the execution that really brought this down. The dialogue was so strange. It was just very, very strange. For an example, there's another character called Delara. Her and Marietta are in a really serious situation, and Delaria goes to her and talks to her about her romance with the captain, and I'm like, this is not the time or place to be talking about that. Like, it felt very, the writing felt very juvenile. The dialogue wasn't believable. There was a couple of instances in this book where 2 characters are saying something to each other and it should be in private, but it's never described that other characters like walked away from the situation. So there was times where I was like, she's hardly saying that in front of 5 other people, but it wasn't explained that the other people weren't there or weren't listening. It's hard to describe, but it wasn't really well done. I just really don't think it was well done. It was okay. It wasn't like the worst thing in the whole world. It really wasn't. I genuinely do think some people would really enjoy this. Just wasn't my cup of tea. I think also the book didn't really know who to target to. It felt very young adult. It felt very juvenile in ways. And then like out of nowhere there's a sex scene. So I'm like, okay, this is a like new adult book maybe. And it's not even fade to black. Things are described. I didn't really know where to position this book. And like, that is absolutely fine. But like, it was shocking because I thought I was reading like a very young adult book and I wasn't. So I just think good plot, bad execution. Didn't like the characters or dialogue. I didn't believe the stakes that much, even like when it comes to Marietta's life or the revolution, things like that. I just didn't click with me. I think that's all I have to say about this book, which is a pity. Yeah, it is always a pity to read a disappointing book, but it happens. It happens when you read a lot. But yeah, it was unfortunate. And I did like save it for Christmas as well because it was kind of a Christmassy book. But yeah, I honestly do think other people would enjoy this, just not for me. Okay, we're going to flip-flop again. This was a 5-star read. So this is Darker Shade of Magic by V. Schwab. This is the first part of a trilogy and I cannot wait to move on to book 2. Cannot wait. I think this really came at a good time for me. I think I was like craving like a good fantasy book and I got it with this. So this is just like a fun, easy to digest, well done fantasy book. Came at a good time, really enjoyed it. So basically in the story you have these parallel worlds. Kel is the main character and he's an Antari, so that means he has the ability to travel between them. So you have like 4, you have grey, is it grey, red, white and black. and each one has like various stages of magic. So Grey London has like barely any, Red has quite a lot, White has magic but it's a bit different, and then Black is like mysterious right now. We don't really know what's there at the moment. So yeah, Kel, he is like, he's still a bit of an enigma, a little bit of mystery. He's adopted by the royal family in the Red London. His job is to kind of go between the Londons with messages, so between the different monarchs in each one. And then unofficially he's a smuggler, so he's taking artifacts from each London and like selling them in another London, things like that. He does that and gets into serious trouble. So the book is about the ramifications of that, of him smuggling something he shouldn't have smuggled. So yeah, I loved the world. It was so easy to, like, this could have been convoluted, but it wasn't. So easy to kind of like believe the worlds and believe the colours, believe the characters. I just really enjoyed reading this so much. Definitely straight 5-star. You have then Lila Bard. She's in Grey London, which is our London in real life. She's this like pickpocket. She really wants to be like a pirate. She really wants to like go on adventures and make her own. She steals from Kel, but then she saves Kel and she's determined to have an adventure, so she goes along with him. I would say my only gripe would be that things maybe work out a little bit too easy, or things resolve maybe a little bit too easy, but you still know this is a big setup for a series. I think if this was a standalone, I would have wanted a bit more fleshed out, but it is the start of a series, so I'm sure we'll get there. So really happy about that. Total opposite of Midnight in Everwood. I loved the characters in all of this. Like, the villains were a little bit like comic book villains, a little bit, but in a good way. There's another Antari, so there's very little Antari, they're kind of special. There's another Antari called Holland, and he's from White London, and he's actually very mistreated. I really loved his character, but you still really feel for him. He does a lot of really wrong things, but he's kind of the antagonist to Kel, but you still really feel for him. I loved Kel's adopted brother. Yeah, the characters were definitely the strong point. Really loved the plot. Loved it, loved it, loved it. It was just a lot of fun. I just had fun reading this. It's just a well done book. I think V. Schwab is really talented. I cannot wait to move on to Gathering of Shadows and like see what else happens. Yeah, this was just a lot of fun and I loved it. Okay, these are a little bit more recent. I read From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this was a journey. I did talk about this in detail in my 24-hour romance readathon, so I'll link that here. This was a funny book. This was really, really funny because I really had low expectations for this because I've heard like bad reviews of it. I've heard good things too, but mostly bad. And then I surprised myself by quite enjoying it, reading it very quickly. Like, it was very easy to digest, and it's like a 600-page tome. So yeah, I'm surprised by how much I enjoyed it and devoured it. That being said, I like the flaws of this book are glaring. Like, they are just in front of your face. The writing style is not good. Like, the writing style pulls this book down so much, which is really unfortunate. The main thing is the use of, is it parentheses or just full stops? A good example of this is like the author kind of like repeats herself a lot. So the narrator is Poppy, like the main character. So an example is he ... He knew about that. Like, it's very jarring, like very, very jarring. That is actually fine to use every so often, but it's used way too often in this book, way too much, to the point that it loses its significance when someone is delaying their speech or trying to think of what to say next. When that happens, it happens way too much. There's definitely parts of this I think were unedited. Like, I really don't think this was edited well. I think, honestly, at the start especially, I think there were sentences that were accidentally left in, which is a pity, because I do think if this was well edited and some of those full stops taken out, it would have been a decent book. It definitely has other flaws, like it's very tropey, very, very tropey. For example, the main character is not like other girls, she's special. And she doesn't know she's special and she needs the man to tell her. You know, the girl is a badass killer and it's just more significant because she's a girl, you know. All those things, like very outdated things. Also, what I didn't like is the villain in this is called the Dark One. And there's nothing to suggest why he's called that. There's no reason. And it reminded me of the Darkling in Shadow and Bone, but that makes sense because the Darkling in Shadow and Bone summons shadows and he wears a black kefta. You know, he is dark. It makes sense. Where the main villain in this is called the Dark One, and there's no reason. And I just do think it was used for the sake of it to sound ominous for some reason, but no, didn't really land for me. But in this, I did actually quite enjoy the plot, even though it was bad. But yeah, it's kind of like a typical fantasy romance book. You have Poppy, she's the maiden, and we don't quite know what that means yet. So I think that's going to be elaborated more in books, like in books to come. I do think there's like 4 or 5 books in this series. I did like this enough that I think I will continue. Yeah, it was like junk food for the mind a little bit. Like, I enjoyed it. Was it good for me? No. She's supposed to kind of stay away from people. She's supposed to be kind of isolated. Her only real relationships is her companion Tawny and her guards. So she has Victor and Hawk. And the main plot is the romance between her and Hawk. So it's a little bit of a forbidden romance. There was definitely a lot of elements I liked about this book. There is a section in this, and I mentioned this in the readathon, where Poppy like explains how she's feeling to Victor and her situation and just her wanting to like make her own decisions. I really did like that and have experiences. The pacing was interesting because it actually goes straight into the romance, and then rather than it being slow burn. So I wasn't expecting that, so that was quite good. So yeah, they live in this world where children, depending on when they're like what order they're born in, have different roles. So firstborn, I think, stay with their family, can live a normal life. I think secondborns go to be ascended, so that means they go to become immortal, more or less, and to be godlike. And then the thirdborn, I think, are sent to the gods, that they're sent to the temple to serve, so they kind of have to leave their families altogether. There definitely is like overdone tropes like vampires and werewolves in this book. The plot of like the government and those in power are hiding what's actually going on, which is also quite fun as well. You know, all these things have been done 10 million times, but you know, it's fun. Why not? I actually did quite like the ending. It's funny, like there's things that you think aren't important that actually are important. Things that you think are actually flyaway comments are actually very important. So I thought that was interesting. Kind of saw the twist coming. The like sex scenes are okay. There is some things that will make you scratch your head and wonder what's going on, and I think more will be explained in the next book. There is some like weird things that I'm like, what does that mean? I did enjoy it. I thought like it ends on a serious cliffhanger. I really hope the next few books are edited better. I did notice that with ACOTAR, so I really noticed that like Court of Mist and Fury was edited better than Thorns and Roses. So I'm hoping maybe something similar happened to this. We shall see. I don't know. I did find the first chapter was very info dumpy, but the whole book isn't like that. I think the first chapter or 2, you're like, whoa, okay, this is the world they live in. But the rest of the book is just more plot. It's definitely more plot heavy than romance heavy, which is nice too, which I prefer. But yeah, kind of juvenile in places, overdone in places. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Like, was it good? No. Did I enjoy it? Yes. It's definitely one of those books. I will continue with the series. And this one I got is so heavy. I don't know what type of publication I got. But yeah, I actually devoured this. I think if you are a fan of ACOTAR, I think you would like this book. But yeah, I don't really know if I endorse this or not. Like, I'm well aware of the flaws, but I had a good time. You know, sometimes books are bad but good, you know? That's how I felt. So I gave it 3 stars. I couldn't rank it any higher. I think if it was well edited, I would have given it 4. I just wish it was modernized a little bit more, well written, because the plot was strong. I did enjoy it. So the next one I read as well was Olympus. So this is by Rachel Smith, and this was originally put out as a webtoon, so you can read this for free on the webtoon app. There is like 3 volumes out right now, I think, and the 4th one's coming out soon. And this has one volume has about 25 episodes. So yeah, if you do want, rather than buying this, you can read it on webtoon. I do prefer looking at paper than a screen, so I did buy it. This is so much fun. I really enjoyed it. It's basically a Hades and Persephone romance graphic novel. It's kind of set in modern times, so it's kind of set in like a normal city, like modern city, but it is Olympus. My one thing about this book, I do think the author kind of expects you to know a little bit about Greek mythology before going in here. I think if you're a fan of Greek mythology, you'll really enjoy this. And even if you're not, and you're just kind of learning the names, I think you'd still have a good time. I think it's more fun if you have a vague knowledge of Greek mythology. I have a very base level. I watched the Troy movie and I read Circe by Madeline Miller. That's all I know. But I still really enjoyed it. It does deal with like dark themes, so there is like, and what's really nice is the author put trigger warnings at the front, so if you do want to check those out before you pick it up, you can. But there are things like emotionally abusive relationships, sexual abuse, That being said, this book is still very fun and lighthearted and very well written. It's very funny, it's very well drawn. I love the colour scheme. I just love that Persephone is pink and Hades is blue, and it is just very funny in places. But yeah, it definitely has dark themes as well, so I'm interested to see where it goes. So far, Hades and Persephone are only kind of like introduced to each other. In this, actually, I think Persephone's drink is spiked and he actually kind of like helps her. And I think Persephone has her mother's very controlling over her. Hades in this has had a kind of a toxic relationship before Persephone. So yeah, it was a fun, well done, but still has serious, kind of deals with serious things well. Yeah, good stuff. I am excited to get to the next ones. And the last one, I read Bridgerton. So the first book is The Duke and I, and these are by Julia Quinn. This came out quite a while ago, I didn't realise. But of course, this is the book that inspired the TV show. And in my vlog, I like watched a few of the episodes and read this alongside it. This usually doesn't happen, but the adaptation is much better than the book. Much better. The show is so good in a trashy way. Much better than the book. The book is definitely more just focuses on Daphne and Simon, where the show has a few more characters, has a few more plot lines. Things are developed a bit better. But yeah, this was okay up until the ending. I was like, in my head it was about a 3-star book up until the ending. If you've read this, I won't spoil it, but there's kind of like a more or less very disturbing sex scene at the end of this. Really, not so much disturbing, but uncomfortable. And it really ruined the book for me, which is a pity, because I was like, oh, this is like a fun historical romance book. But yeah, the ending kind of like put it off for me, so I did knock it down to 2 stars. So the story is, you have the 8 Bridgerton siblings. They all have their respective books with their respective like romances. So this one is Daphne, the next one is Anthony's, and I think the third one is Benedict's, I think. So yeah, Simon is the Duke of Hastings. He kind of like comes back to society after travelling for a really long time. The fact that he's a duke and single, he's just like hounded by all the mothers in society, like wanting him to marry their daughters. And then Daphne has just entered society, like looking to get married. Simon and her brother Anthony are best friends, and Daphne and Simon kind of agree to like fake court each other. So he'd be left alone by the mothers and she would be seen as quite desirable, and so she would get more offers or more callers at this time. But of course they actually end up falling in love, of course. So yeah, fake dating trope. So yeah, the book just focuses on them really rather than the side plots. For that reason, I really did enjoy the show a lot more. The show also handles the disappointing scene better. It's still not great in the show, to be honest, but it does handle it just a little bit better. So yeah, they end up just falling in love, having to get married, but neither of them wanting to really. And it's all just the ramifications of that happening. So it was fun. I mean, it's not, like this isn't classic literature or anything like that. It's not the most well-written thing. You do have like this Gossip Girl-esque thing going on. There's this, what's her name? Lady Whistledown. She writes this gossip column about everything that's happening in the society. So nobody wants to like rub her up the wrong way. Nobody knows who she is. So it is like a little bit of like, period piece meets Gossip Girl. It's a little bit like that. So it is fun. It's funny. I would say the dialogue, like sometimes it's very old English and then some of it's very modern. So I don't know, did the author like forget sometimes that she was writing a period piece? I don't quite know. Also, when I didn't find like when something happens, like for example, there's a scene where Simon and Anthony accidentally fall into a lake. It's described quite badly, that you can't really picture what's going on very well. And that happens a few times. I feel like the strength of this book is actually more the interactions with the characters rather than like any action or plot. But it was still fun. It's just a pity about the scene at the end, which was really disappointing. It's more or less Daphne taking advantage of Simon, which was really disappointing. Definitely wouldn't fly today if this was released. The show depicts it a lot better. That is such a pity about that. I still want to continue with the Bridgerton series because I definitely want to read the next book so I can watch the next season, because I think I would like to know the books before going into the season. And I really liked Anthony as a character. I liked him in the book and in the show, so I'm looking forward to him being the main character. So yeah, I was enjoying this up until the end, which is a pity, but anyway. But yeah, I will continue on. I don't think I'll like read them in succession or anything like that. I think I will read them in tandem with the shows coming out, because I think they are doing season 3 of the Bridgerton show, but I think it's actually based on book 4. So I think it's based on Colin Bridgerton. So that will be interesting. Show's a lot better. I think if you don't want to bother with the book, just watch the show. I know I'm really late to the party as well. Like, this show has been out for ages. I think that since lockdown, but yeah. Anyway, I'm behind the times. I said I wouldn't ramble for a long time, but I did. Oh no. I'll try not let this pile up so much again and try to just talk about less books. But yeah, once I go on a ramble, I just keep going. Anyway, but yeah, I think my reviews were fair. Very mixed bag here, I have to say. Definitely some great stuff and really some not so great stuff. But I had fun, so that's all that matters. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll link all the books I mentioned and my socials in the description. If you'd like to subscribe, I do anything like book related on this channel. So reading wrap-ups like this one, like TBR videos, hauls, reading vlogs, all that jazz. So yeah, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.